What is up, and welcome to the Red and Bold Show. We're excited to have you here joining us talking 49ers football. I am your host, Marc Adams. You can find me at 49ers Camelot. You can also find me at 49ers Web Zone, where I do a little bit of writing here and there. I'm joined by my great co-host, Anthony Robertson, who you can find at 49ers Cutback. Ant, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it's finally getting over a cold. You could probably hear it a little bit in my voice, but excited to be able to talk 49ers and be able to make it through an episode. I think, talking 49ers. So I'm excited to be coming on this side of health. And I'm excited about, the 49ers. The draft is under a month away now. And so a lot of players are going to be coming the 49ers way, at least 6. At least that's what we're believing. And maybe some free agents still, as they've still been making some under the radar signings. I think it's still an interesting time to see how the 49ers are going to build their team and what it's going to look like in 2026.
So let me ask you, the illness that you've been dealing with, it's not due to a lack of sleep because of a new baby, is it?
I'm pretty sure that contributes to it. Yeah, between work, trying to watch as many prospects in the draft as possible, and yeah, this baby that keeps making all kinds of noise and wants to eat and do all kinds of things. So yeah, it's a fun time, but yeah, definitely puts a little bit of stress on the body.
Yeah, babies are like that, but it's worth it. Thanks
Yeah.
to everybody that's in the chat already. We see you. Welcome in with us. We're actually going to do some Q&A time where we those of you that are live with us, we're going to let you ask some questions today. We normally try to get to questions, but sometimes it's hard, to manage everything that we're doing and still catch all of the questions. So we're going to try and be more diligent with that today and answer some questions that you might have. So let's jump into some things that we are going to discuss already. The 49ers, I think it was yesterday, signed guard Robert Jones. What do we need to know about him? Because this is a veteran with a lot of experience. Does the signing move the needle in any way? Does this look like a starting guard situation for the left guard, or do you see this as more of a competition type thing?
Yeah, I think that they're setting themselves up for a competition at left guard. When you look at what Robert Jones has done in his career, he's undrafted out of Middle Tennessee State, and then he kind of worked himself up to being a starter his last year with Miami in 2024. So when you're talking about scheme fit, right, it's very similar. Mike McDaniel with the Miami Dolphins, the way that they run their offense, there is the outside zone mixed with the gap scheme and some of the power elements, all those things he was able to run. Last year, he goes and signs with Dallas, and he has a neck injury. So he doesn't play, and he misses the entire season. But it's a guy that's still 27 years old, and he's a guy that's really, pushed beyond what people thought he could do. And so I do think that him and Brett Toth, even though they're not sexy names, they're not guys who people are really looking at as potential starters probably everywhere else around the league, the 49ers are looking at that. And they've done this before. When you look at some of the things they did even in 2019, their offensive line had some no-name guys all over it. By the time they got to the Super Bowl, their starting center was Ben Garland. So this is something the 49ers like to do. They like to go a little bit cheaper along the offensive line at some positions, and we know that drives people crazy. But when you look at how much they pay a guy like Trent Williams, the best offensive tackle in the league for a long time, you have to be able to skimp in some areas. We know Chris Foerster talked about they go after playmakers instead of offensive line. So this is something they do. So I think right now it appears that we're going to have a competition at left guard, and we'll see. I think it kind of pushes what they're going to do with those 6 draft picks away from offensive line a little bit, probably until day 3, where I think that they're starting to look at some day 3 offensive linemen. That starts making sense. Somebody that could come in and compete. But we'll see. I think right now it's going to come down to Robert Jones and Brett Toth, maybe Connor Kobe, to see who starts at left guard.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we wish that they went out and really tried to bring in somebody that's going to be better than just journeyman type, but that's not what they did. So, or at least it's not what they've done so far. Maybe they'll draft a rookie that can come in and beat out the ones that are there. But that kind of leads me to the next thing. Matt Mayoko posted something, and I'm going to share my screen here because he basically posted the offensive line as it currently stands. So let me share that screen for those that are watching instead of listening, because I want you to see here. So this is from yesterday. I think is today. Yeah, today. This is from 2 days ago. It looks like. So 49ers offensive line, left tackle Trent Williams, Vidarian Lowe, left guard Robert Jones, Brett Toth, Connor Colby. And by the way, last week we were calling him Toth. Herb Mayoko called him Toth. And so I went to Pro Football Reference and looked up the pronunciation, and it's listed as Toth. So usually you and I think, are elite when it comes to pronouncing names. So evidently we got that one wrong. So I wanted to correct that. So Brett Toth must be how I like Toth better, but Toth it must be. So Robert Jones, Brett Toth, Connor Colby. At center, Jake Brendel, Drake Nugent. Right guard, Dominic Pooney, Nick Zakel. At right tackle, Colton McKivitz, Austin Pleasance, Brandon Parker. So my question for you is this a Super Bowl winning offensive line, or do you have some concerns?
I think there's always concerns when you have guys who haven't consistently started games. And I think that there's always a concern with Jake Brendel. I mean, we've seen moments where Jake Brendel has been good, and we've seen moments where he struggled. And so I do know that Jake Brendel has helped the 49ers get to the Super Bowl before, but you said Super Bowl winning. And I don't know if that's the case. And I don't know if Brett Toth, if Robert Jones, I don't know if those are going to be guys that have done it. But there was a time when people didn't think Laken Tomlinson was that good either. And then he came to the 49ers and he played really well. So I do like to give a little bit of leeway when it comes to players who are still developing, that are under the age of 30 as offensive linemen, to get a chance, to play for Chris Foerster and how they'll fit within a system. So even though I don't look at it and I'm not as excited about it if I would have, seen like Joel Bitonio or one of those guys sign as a left guard, or if we would have spent a high draft pick on an offensive lineman that was going to step in and play, I think I'd feel more confident. But I do feel pretty confident when you're talking Trent Williams, Colt McKivitz, and Dominic Pooney. I think that those guys make me feel confident. The question marks are center. Can you be consistent enough? And then with left guard, is Robert Jones or Brett Toth going to be the guy that can step in? If they can do it, then yeah, I think that they can get us there. The question is going to be, can they play well enough? And right now, I can't say they're a Super Bowl winning team. It's going to have to develop during the season. They're going to have to get some chemistry and play well together.
Yeah, and we look at just the most recent Super Bowl that they were in. The offense was great. The offensive line was good enough to get them there. And for most of the game, it was good enough to win the Super Bowl. But then toward the end of the game, a mistake by an offensive lineman that was playing in place of an injured offensive lineman made a mistake that perhaps cost them the game. Now, if the defense makes a play there at the end of the game, then they do win it. But you can't always rely on that. The defense had been really good until Dre Greenlaw went down, and then had their struggles from that point on. But we still, the offensive line is one of the keys. And you go back to the offensive lines that Jim Harbaugh had, the offensive lines that Steve Mariucci had. Now, those teams didn't lead to a Super Bowl win, but I don't know that those situations were offensive line. If you go back to that Baltimore Ravens Super Bowl, that really wasn't on the offensive line. It was the defense played horribly in the first half and part of the second half, and that was a really good defense. But it was just one of those games where Joe Flacco played the game of his life, and Anquan Bolden did what he always does, and they had a receiver kick returner that made a couple of really big plays, and the next thing you know, they're calling some bad decisions down inside the 5-yard line to Michael Crabtree. But we won't go. Things could have turned out differently. We can't keep crying about it, but offensive line it really makes a difference. And when you go back to Seifert's teams and Walsh's teams, they always had a good offensive line. So it's critical. If you're going to win the Super Bowl, you have to have a good offensive line. They don't have to be the greatest, but they do need to be good.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes down to chemistry. How well they play together and how you build a team together. And so that's going to be one of the interesting things. You're going to have a new member to this offensive line together. I think is going to be one of the key elements, to this. And I'm hoping that it's going to be Robert Jones or Brett Toth that are able to step in and play well. I was hoping for an offensive lineman in the draft. I think that was still a really big need. But I think the 49ers are going to invest in playmakers. This is what they're looking to do. Get an edge defender, get a wide receiver, maybe some secondary help. But they are definitely looking to add a lot of, weapons and then try to build the offensive line this way. Maybe there's some talent there. Brett Toth played pretty well for Philadelphia last year. So I think that there is talent there. But it's just going to be interesting to see how well those guys end up playing.
I saw a rumor that the 49ers have interest in former Steelers and Chargers running back Najee Harris. This is a signing that I actually, for a while, have been thinking, man, I'd like to see him as a complement to Christian McCaffrey. And I don't judge that based off of last season. He only played in 3 games. In week 3, tore his Achilles and missed the rest of the season. So I don't know how he's going to come back from that. He may never be the same. But this is a guy who had 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons. Last year only rushed for about 60 yards, partly because of that injury. What would you, if they went out and brought in Najee Harris, how would you feel about that? Do you think he would be a good complement to McCaffrey if he's healthy?
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting about him is he caught a lot of passes in his career, especially his rookie season. So he's a guy that can make some plays out of the backfield in the passing game. And the thing about Najee Harris is he's never been built on speed. He's built on power. He's built on vision. And that's something that he has a lot of. And I think that he would be interesting for the 49ers because I do think he is more of a weapon out of the backfield than a guy like Brian Robinson. Not a big difference, but it is a difference. We do know Bobby Turner absolutely loved him coming out of the draft. Bobby Turner called him so many times. I remember listening to an interview in the draft process where Najee Harris thought he was going to be drafted by the 49ers for a long time because of Bobby Turner being so in contact with him. And, of course, we knew Najee was going to go in the first round, and the 49ers ended up trading up for Trey Lance, I believe, in that draft. But, he's a guy that's right from the Bay Area in Antioch, California. I've seen him play since he was in high school. So Najee's a special dude. I don't know what he'll look like coming off the Achilles. But yeah, I think the 49ers would have interest in him. And you're talking about a guy that can power up and get an extra yard or two, win around the goal line. That's definitely something that he could add to this football team.
Chris in the chat said, maybe I'm crazy, but I like Brian Robinson Jr. more than Najee. They should have paid Robinson more. Yeah, I like Brian Robinson as well, but I definitely thought that he was going to go somewhere else because I felt like he deserved more than what the 49ers were going to pay him.
Yeah, I think that, the 49ers are pretty comfortable with Jordan James. I really do. I think they feel pretty confident with him. So I think that whatever running back they get, they're looking for somebody that's cheaper, right? They're bargain shopping right now for a running back. Christian McCaffrey is going to take the load of the snaps. Jordan James could kind of be intertwined into that. So whoever they bring in can't be expecting a big role. So I think that that's something to remember and probably why they weren't in on some of the bigger names that were available in free agency when it comes to the running back position.
Well, Collie Young in the chat said, I think Jordan James is going to be a sleeper. And he very well may be, but you mentioned that the 49ers seem to be pretty comfortable with him. How are you comfortable? I realize that they see him every day in practice, but we've only seen him once and very limited touches of the ball last season as a rookie. Was that just one of those things that you have McCaffrey, you have Robinson, they were both healthy, and that's why we didn't see Garendo. That's why we didn't see Jordan James. Patrick Taylor Jr. was injured. Now he's back. How do you see that running back room? Do you think that they ought to be comfortable with James considering that we didn't see him. That doesn't mean that they didn't see him enough. But what do you think about that?
Well, I will say this: he got injured, and I think that set him back a little bit. But I love the fact that he had to work his way onto the active game day roster. He was a healthy scratch there for a little bit, and then at some point he beat out Isaac Arendo. And
Right.
so I think that shows Jordan James was showing some things in practice, not just in the backfield, but on special teams as well. And I think that did probably give them a lot of confidence in who he could be. They were pretty convicted on him after they watched him at the Oregon Pro Day. They said he caught the ball really well. He was running the ball really well. And if you watch Jordan James' college film, this is a guy that was very good around the goal line, finishing in the end zone. He was very good at short yardage, getting some extra yards. He plays a lot bigger than his frame. So I think that they're very happy with him. And I do think he's got the ability to be able to catch the ball in the backfield consistently. He had some drops at Oregon, but those are some concentration things that he can work out. So I think it does show that he improved during the season, and they're probably very happy with where he is. And I do expect a bigger role for Jordan James, minus them signing another guy that takes some of his role. But I think that, yeah, he can add a lot, especially in short yardage situations. He was very good at finding little creases and being able to get first downs when he was at Oregon.
Lou in the chat said, come on, Ant, they are bargain hunting on all the free agents. What do you think about that?
I think they are in some sense, but remember, there also got to be people willing to take a bargain. Mike Evans and Christian Kirk took a bargain to come to San Francisco. So yeah, they're bargain shopping in some categories, but also they got guys who are willing to take a bargain. So Mike Evans is a Hall of Famer. He's going to walk in, 4 or 5 years after he retires. And he's just a supreme, really good player. And Christian Kirk, he took a lot less money than he could have got other places to come to San Francisco. So I think in some categories that is correct by Lou. And in other categories, hey, it's only a bargain if the player is willing to take it. Last year, Devontae Adams, he wasn't willing to take it, right? Wholesale prices, retail value, all that stuff. Well, Mike Evans was. And so I think, bargain shopping, yes. But that's what happens when people want to win a Super Bowl. In 1994, there was a lot of bargain shopping with guys like Ricky Jackson and guys like that who came in on cheap deals to go get a Super Bowl. So that happens sometimes.
Yeah, and if you look at the trade for Osa Odighizuwa, they didn't bargain shop there. They paid a premium for his services. So yeah, I think that their approach this year is different than last year. It's different than it was when they went and signed Javon Hargrave for just a disgustingly high contract for him. But, hindsight's 2020. It's easy to say that now compared to then. Are there any free agents still available that you would love that the 49ers could realistically get, whether they're bargain shopping or not? Any that you would love to see in San Francisco? And so I'm not talking like the Deion Sanders types. I'm talking the ones that they might realistically go for. Any out there that you would love to see them go for?
Well, I think before the Robert Jones signing, I was looking at Joel Bitonio. I thought that he was a realistic option, had played for Kyle Shanahan. He's 35 years old, but he still played pretty good football, very good pass protector. I thought that he was a real option. I think after that, it's starting to get a little bit more difficult to find guys who kind of fit what the 49ers are looking for on the free agent market. I think it still comes down to edge, right? Where you got guys like Joey Bosa that's still available. All the reports for Jennifer Lee Chan is he's not expected to take less money to go to San Francisco. So that thing's going to wait itself out. I think a name that's out there that a lot of people probably should keep an eye on, depending on how the draft goes, is Von Miller. Because I think that if the 49ers miss out on a Cassius Howell or, R. Mason Thomas or one of these speed element edge rushers in the draft, they could call Von Miller and potentially bring him in. He was still very productive last year for the Washington Commanders. I know he's 36 years old, but 9 sacks, that's very productive as a designated pass rusher, and that's a role the 49ers are looking for. So I think guys like that, I think a lot of it's probably going to happen closer to the draft. There's usually 2 weeks before the draft, all of a sudden teams realize how the board's going to look. They make a couple veteran signings, and veterans kind of give up a little money because they don't want to be on the outside looking in when teams draft. And then after the draft, there'll be some more signings and stuff like that. So I do expect the 49ers to still make a couple of moves in free agency, but I think it's going to wait and see approach at this point, as the 49ers are probably going to attack the draft first and then see what kind of shakes out after that.
Yeah, and you make an interesting point with after the draft, because usually the 49ers find some gems in that undrafted rookie field. Last year, they didn't really put their even hardly put their toe in the water on that one. And so if they've been more aggressive in free agency this year, if that means that they're going to be more aggressive with the undrafted free agents, then we could see them find some other hidden gems that could make a difference with this team.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of players. And right now, I think the 49ers have like 15, 16 roster spots still available on their 90-man roster. They have 6 draft picks. So they're going to fill those out some way. It's either going to be 10 undrafted free agents. Maybe it'll be, 8 undrafted free agents and a couple of, veterans that they bring in kind of after the fact. I think they still probably need another defensive tackle. I think this draft is not a great defensive tackle draft. So you might get somebody later on, a veteran that potentially steps in. So there's definitely going to be some holes to fill, and they're going to go bargain shopping. Lou said he was talking about the O-line, and they always bargain shop on the offensive line, but I think they're going to look to bargain shop with some of the depth pieces as well. And we'll see what that money ends up being like. But yeah, they still got some work to do to fill out this roster.
Speaking of the draft, what do you think that they're going to do at pick 27? Is it going to be wide receiver, edge, offensive tackle, something else? And they recently met with University of Washington wide receiver Denzel Boston, and Matt Barrows said that more top-end wide receivers are on their way. So are you thinking? Yesterday I was having a little chat on X with John Chapman talking about Howell and R. Mason Thomas. Do you think they could go that route with an edge guy? Do you think that it could be an offensive tackle that we haven't really been preparing for? Or do you think it's going to be one of these playmaking receivers or something else? Maybe they go best player available and it's a linebacker. Would they even do that? Or do you think it's going to be one of these bigger needs?
Yeah, I think it's most likely now to be a wide receiver or a defensive end. I think that that's kind of where the trend is going, especially with Bryce Huff retiring. I think that opened a spot now for a designated pass rusher. You think you look at base defensive ends, they don't really need that. So that's always interesting when you see people talking about, these base down defensive ends. They could always do that. But I think that you're looking at edge, you're looking at wide receiver. And now with the trade for Osa Odigizua, you don't have a 3rd round pick. So you have 1 pick on day 1 pick on day 2. I think those get really heightened in on, because those guys need to make an impact on your football team in 2026. So you're looking to get impact players. The easiest positions to get those are going to be with an edge rusher who can put pressure on the quarterback right away. And we've seen Raheem Morris have extreme success with guys doing that. When he had James Pierce Jr., he brought those guys in up there to rush the passer. Jalen Walker as well from Georgia. So I think that someone like Cassius Howell, R. Mason Thomas, I think are very interesting in round 1. And that could be a shot at 27. But with all the guys the 49ers are meeting with, those wide receivers they're meeting with, Casey Concepcion, and with Denzel Boston, and I'm sure, like you said, there'll be more. I think the 49ers are leaning into the wide receiver market. And I think pick 27 and 58 go wide receiver D-end or D-end wide receiver. They're just going to try to grab those 2 positions. And I think that having somebody that has some versatility that could play kick and punt returner might play into this. I think a Casey Concepcion, if he is there, would be enticing. You could use him in a gadget role early on. Let him, run some reverses, some screens, get some things open for him, kind of the way they worked Debo in his rookie season, but then allow him to handle kick and punt return duties. Sky Moore left. Now all you do is fit him right in, even though I think that maybe there's other guys who'd be better X receivers down the road, because that's not what Concepcion does. It might be an easy fit early. The question they have to ask is, how far in the draft can you get a really good edge rusher that can generate pressure? Is R. Mason Thomas going to make it to 58? Is there going to be somebody else that makes it there? I think that's the big question. Where do the defensive end talent run out, and where does the wide receiver talent run out? And I think that's going to be the interesting part for the 49ers. But I think those are the 2 positions. I think everyone's honing in on it correctly. I think that's where they're going.
When people talk about Howell and R. Mason Thomas, some of their questions have been centered around short arm length. Does that concern you? Somebody on X asked me that last night. And my response was, look, is that optimum if they have shorter arms? No. But there have been short arm defenders that have done very well. Ultimately, it comes down to just guys making plays. And so, are you concerned about arm length, or do you look at like a Chris Borland who, as a linebacker, even though he had short T-Rex kind of arms, he still tackled just about everything that came his way?
Yeah, I think that short arms is always a consideration because they're going to be going against offensive tackles that are going to have a lot of length on them, and we know that that length will allow them to get their hands on them. But you're talking about two unique speed rushers. Both of them can bend the corner. Both of them have pretty good handwork. I think they're extremely explosive. They're going to win using speed. With Cassius Howe, he's using a speed to power type technique where he can go speed upfield and then he gets you to over kick on your slide, and all of a sudden, boom, weight transfer inside, and he wins with power. So he's got that. With R. Mason Thomas, wrist control, handwork. He's got a chop move, a swim move, a spin. He's got a lot of things that he can do. I think he's actually a little bit more fluid of an athlete, even though straight ahead speed, not as fast as Cassius Howe. I think he changes direction a little bit better. So I think both of those guys are equipped to do it. And I think when you look at Raheem Morris, he didn't care. Jalen Walker was one of those unique guys where it was like, can he be big enough to rush off the outside? And he said, you know what? I don't care. I don't care. He's a hybrid. I don't care. He's got short arms. None of that mattered to him. And so I don't think it's going to matter now. You brought it up, production. And I think when you look at the way the 49ers are going to rush the passer, with Joe or with Nick Bosa and Osa and, Keon White and Mikael Williams, I think that they're going to need that speed element, a guy that can kind of move around quickly. So I think R. Mason Thomas, Cassius Howe make a lot of sense. They're not the only guys in this draft that can bring pressure off the edge with speed, but they are some guys that are probably towards the beginning that 49ers are definitely looking at.
All right, let's get to some questions here from some of those that are joining us in the chat. Reese Niner asks, with 2 wide receivers picked up in free agency, do you see them taking a wide receiver in the draft rounds 1 or 2? Yes, we've already mentioned that we see edge or wide receiver in one of those rounds, and they may do one in the first round and one in the second round.
Yeah, I think that they're going to go wide receiver in round 1 or 2, just however it shakes out, and depending on what's available. If they are higher on the defensive end that's available in round 1, that's where they'll go. If it's a wide receiver, that's where they'll go. But I think this is just basic. It feels like a foregone conclusion again for the 49ers, which is crazy.
Let's see. This isn't really a question, but Hugh Wilkins, 33, says that Barch signed with the Lions today. Yes, we did see that. Lou asks, do you feel it's imperative that they draft a tackle this year?
I don't think it's imperative the way that they've built the team now. The likelihood is, right, Trent Williams is going to come to a conclusion with the 49ers. I think all the things are signaling that. They've got Colton McKivitz under contract. They signed Vidarian Lowe. They are pretty set at offensive tackle right now. I think that they could draft an offensive tackle probably in round 4. I think that's probably the most likely now for offensive line, is probably around there. And I think you're going to start seeing them kind of sniffing around the offensive linemen. They're going to be kind of in that range. But I don't think it's like imperative that they draft an offensive tackle now. I think they've decided that they're going to invest in free agency, and that's the way they've chosen to do it. And now expect them to go look for playmakers on offense and defense that can go help turn things around. So they've kind of punted on the draft with offensive line again. Maybe they end up, surprising us, but I doubt it.
Joe Carmack asks, which position would you guys say is the deepest? I think it's wide receiver.
I think it's linebacker now. I think when you look at Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, D. Winters, Nick Martin, Tatum Bethune, Garrett Wallow, and I know I'm missing Luke Gifford. I mean, that to me is the most, stacked room right now. In fact, minus an injury, I expect one of those guys to get moved at some point. Like, they probably trade one of those guys away for a 6th or 7th round pick in 2027. That's how talented a room I think that is. So With Gifford, he's the best special teams player. I expect him to make it, but guys like Garrett Wallow, D. Winters, and Nick Martin, depending on how they're going to be used. And one interesting thing to watch is how they use Nick Martin, because Nick Martin is extremely fast, athletic. Could they line him up on the outside sometime and bring him as an edge guy? I think he could be interesting in that category, but we'll see. I mean, that would be a fundamental change for him in position that he plays.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I had not really considered that. Trying to find. Here's a question from Reese Niner. Since you just brought up Nick Martin, did Martin not develop well enough to see the field last year with all our injury troubles?
I think that the injuries, kind of set him back. But if you look at what he was doing in training camp when I was watching him, it was pretty clear Nick Martin was further behind than expected. Just watching the way he was going through his drops and coverage, things like that, he was really working on the footwork. He was laboring at it. I saw improvement, but you could tell he was behind everybody else. So I do think that he had a long way to go. I think they're super high on the talent. I think he was just having to learn. And then, of course, we saw when he got out there. I mean, the guy was playing with reckless abandon. He's fun. I mean, the guy's intense. He flies around. He's explosive. You love all those things. I think once the understanding of the defense meets the instincts, he's going to be a really good player. That's part of the reason I kind of said, hey, can we put him on the edge and just send him? Because I think in those cases, he doesn't have to think as much and he could just go and attack. But I think once that happens, I think he's going to be a very good player. I haven't given up on him yet. I just think he fell behind. I think he started behind because he missed the whole season at Oklahoma State, but I think he's still a very talented player.
Chris, Mr. Niner asked, Ant, don't you think that Zeitler on the Chief would have been better than Jones or Toth?
I think that there's always there's probably other guys that you could have invested in. That's why I brought up Joel Petonio too. There are plenty of guys that probably would have been a bigger investment, and you probably would have got potential better play. The 49ers are deciding to go the cheaper route with guys who they believe have upside. They're betting on upside. They're getting these cheap contracts done, and they're going to let these guys go out there and compete. They're kind of going, hey, we want some guys who are hungry, who haven't quite proven it to the level that we're hoping they're going to get to. So, yeah, were there better players available? Absolutely. But they decided to go a different route. I don't always hate that. I as a former coach, I loved looking at somebody and saying I could see all the talent. If I could bring that talent out of them, they could actually be one of those guys. They could be a really good player. And so a lot of times you'll get coaches that bet on themselves. They see something in a player in our system. They'll be this. I could just get them to do that. So I do like that to a point. So sometimes I like betting on some of these guys, but it is a lot easier to say, hey, yeah, Zeitler's out there. Let's go bring him in. We know what he'll be. That's definitely the easier way to go.
Yeah, I talked about how we're elite pronouncing names, and then I mispronounced his.
It's all good.
Chris, Mr. 49er, also asked about Hill from Texas. He said he seems similar to Jalen Walker from last year.
Yeah, I mean, that's the fun thing about linebackers. There's a lot of like hybrid style linebackers right now coming out of the draft. And so I think that the guys who are playing off ball and the guys who are kind of bringing pressure, it's becoming kind of, because of the way offenses are going, where everything's predicated on speed, you're seeing wide open offenses produce these hybrid type players who play in space, but also bring pressure. I think that there are guys like that. I go and blank on the guy from LSU, but he's one of those guys as well. So I do think that there's guys like that. You have to have a place for them in your defense. You have to have a specific role that they fit. So if you're going to get a guy like Hill, you have to know what you're going to get out of him. But I think he's extremely talented. He's going to be a very good player in this draft. I don't expect the 49ers to draft a linebacker, though. I don't think they're going to draft a linebacker. I think they're just too talented at the position right now.
Chris Wall said asked, isn't Christian Kirk expected to be at play in the return game? He has done it in the past.
Right. I think that's starting to become the expectation. But I don't think that necessarily has to be the case, right? I mean, if you could find somebody else, right? Like I did a mock draft last week and I drafted Zachariah Branch from Georgia. And that is a another perfect situation where you get a guy that steps in who is a screen guy who can make some things happen in yak, but is very dynamic when it comes to kick and punt return. A 4.3 speed guy. I'm not saying it needs to be Zachariah Branch, but you see players like that in this draft. You're talking Casey Concepcion. You talk about guys like Zachariah Branch. Those type of guys would be nice inserts for the 49ers, especially if you're getting them later. Now, I think Zachariah Branch would have been great for the 49ers in round 3. They traded that pick away. So he would either have to fall to round 4 or you'd have to invest a little bit higher in round 2. But I think there's plenty of guys like that have the ability to help the 49ers in the return game that maybe you don't have to have a Christian Kirk back there doing that. But if Christian Kirk is the answer, I'm all for it. He's extremely athletic. He's extremely smart. I'm very confident with him taking care of that. I think in that case, you would have to throw Jacob Cowling's name back into the fold about somebody that's probably going to help handle the kick and punt return duties.
So if we're looking at that opening game and nothing's been announced, nothing's been decided, who goes back there to field the first punt? Is it Jacob Cowling? Is it Christian Kirk? If they don't get someone else.
Yeah, I think right now it'd be Jacob Cowling. You know, if they draft another wide receiver, it might make it very difficult for Jacob Cowling to make this roster. You're talking him and Jordan Watkins. I mean, battling for a potential 6 wide receiver spot. Like that's going to be extremely tough. And I think that's what the 49ers are trying to make happen. But I think that it's probably going to come down to Jacob Cowling. That might give him the advantage to make this team over a guy like Watkins, but it could be Watkins as well. He's another guy that has returnability.
Yeah, and don't forget about Junior Bergen or Bergen.
Oh, yeah.
I don't even know how to say his name. I need to look that one up. Because remember, he supposedly is loved by the special teams coordinator. So I don't know what to expect from him, but we mentioned this last year right after the draft. If all he does is return kicks, it's probably unlikely that he makes the team. That was the case last year. We'll see how that turns out this year. Reese Niner asks, could some of those 4th-round picks be moved for a 3rd-round pick?
I think it could. The question is, are you going to walk away from this draft with 5 players? You know what I mean? Like yeah. I talked about, they have 15, 16 spots right now. I think it's likely the 49ers walk away with 6 players. I think it's even more likely they try to trade back at some point and pick up an extra pick. So I think that they're going to try to maneuver a little bit. I think they probably use those 4th-round picks to move one of them as they fall back. I think they try to get like a 6th rounder or something like that to maximize a pick. I think the first 2, there's a chance they move back, but they're not going to want to move back very far because they want to get a player that can impact this team. You don't want to miss out. So I know the conversation points have been, hey, trade back from 27, pick up an extra 3rd-round pick, which sounds great. But if you have a guy like Cassius Howell or you have the receiver that you love and you're sitting there at 27, you don't want to run the risk of all of a sudden going back to 33 and missing out on that guy. So I think that they're going to be careful with it. I would expect one of those 4th-round picks to be turned into a 6th or 7th, something like that as they kind of move back. But other than that, I don't expect too many trade-ups because I don't think they want to lose value. They don't have enough picks. It's not one of those years, Mark, where they have 10, 11 picks like they have before.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they're probably going to stay put for the most part. Chris Wall says, I call BS on them claiming that concussions kept him out that long. I think he's talking about Nick Martin. Do you guys believe that? So do you believe that it was concussion related or do you think it was performance related?
I believe it's concussion related because when it comes to concussions, it's all done independently from the team. So if he was cleared, it would have been cleared and everyone would have noted it around the NFL. When it comes to injuries, you got to be real careful about how you do things now, especially with head injuries and concussions. So if it was another injury and maybe they said, oh, it's just not quite there, he's going to get there at some point, I would say yes. But they would have had to announce that he was cleared of concussion protocol by an independent doctor. So that one I do believe in. It's unfortunate that it was that bad, but I have seen them that bad where they take guys out for long periods of time. It can be a scary thing. And with the way he plays, I mean, that's the thing. Keeping your head out of those big contact hits is tough to do, but that's something Nick Martin's going to have to work on.
Yeah, here's why I believe that Nick Martin missed those games because of concussion. Garrett Wallow. That's why. That's how I know that it was injury related because they suited up Garrett Wallow for 2 games in the postseason. Not to slam on him because he played well in that game against the Eagles, but he doesn't have the talent level that Nick Martin does. Now, sometimes talent's not everything, but still, I think you want your young, fast, athletic linebacker on the field when you're playing a team like the Seahawks that has a lot of speed, or even the Eagles, with Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts and some of the speed that they have. Now, did Wallow help save that game? Yes. I mean, he and Eric Kendricks were great in that Eagles game. Not so much against the Seahawks, but that's really why I believe that it was injury related.
Yeah, I mean that's another good way to look at it, right? It's like you don't want to go get players off the street if you have guys in the building. And I do know they have a lot of belief in Nick Martin, and I think that they would have rather had him get that experience as well. I mean, they had a lot of young guys getting experience, their first looks at playoff football, which is going to greatly benefit a lot of those guys like Alfred Collins and CJ West and guys who got playing time in the playoffs. I think that's going to be huge for this team moving forward. And I think they would have loved to have Nick Martin out there getting the same experience.
Yeah, I would agree. And tell us what you're doing with FanDuel.
Yeah, so FanDuel right now, there's cool things like betting on the draft. You can bet on the draft who's going to be pick number 2. Lots of cool things with that. You want to bet on the 49ers to win the Super Bowl. You feel like this offensive line is good enough, plus 1,600 odds on the 49ers winning the Super Bowl. So all that's available on FanDuel. Of course, you can bet on the basketball tournament that's going on right now. Daily bets, lots of cool stuff. But NFL bets are coming up, and the draft is probably where I'm going to do a lot of my betting. With all the research I do, hey, it's an opportunity to kind of have some fun and bet on the draft, and that's available for everyone if you want to use FanDuel.
Great stuff. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. That's all we have. Thank you for those that were in the chat asking the questions. That really helped us with our content today, so we appreciate that. And if you have just a few seconds, please make sure that you go and like and subscribe, follow, do all that stuff. It really helps us out. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.